Okay, wonderful. All right, hello and welcome to this episode of the International and Canadian Child Rights Partnership podcast series. My name is Isabella Grajczyk, and I'm thrilled to be your host today. This podcast is part of a broader effort to reflect on child rights practices, research, and partnerships across the globe. In today's episode, we are honored to be joined by Dr. Afua Twum-Danso Imoh, a leading scholar whose work critically explores childhoods, child rights, and development, with a strong focus on decoloniality and context, with Ghana as a frequent location of study. Dr. Twum-Danso Imoh is an associate professor in global childhoods and welfare at the University of Bristol. Our conversation today will center on the theme of reciprocity in child rights, a concept that challenges us to think beyond traditional models of child protection and into realms of mutual respect, agency, and empowerment in children's lives. So thank you so much for joining us today. We really, really appreciate it. To begin, could you tell our listeners a bit about your work and what led you to explore themes of reciprocity and child rights?
Thank you so much for inviting me, Isabella. Okay, so I've been doing research research on children's rights for about 23 years, if you include my PhD as well. And one of the things that I was really interested in, which led me to do a PhD, was the Convention on the Rights of the Child. I think when I first heard it during my master's, actually, I'd never heard it before. And I was so struck by the fact that, Ghana was the first country that had ratified it, given everything I know about Ghana at the time when it was ratified. It was under a military dictatorship and everything. So it was something that I was really interested in. And so I wanted to explore that further. So that led me to do a PhD at the University of Birmingham in the UK. And basically for my PhD, all I really wanted to do was just look at the implementation of this convention in the context of Ghana, the first country that had ratified it. And I just wanted to understand how it was being implemented and how some of these principles within the convention and the articles within the convention, how they interacted with core cultural values in Ghana that I was familiar with as somebody I was born in Ghana, and I lived there till I was 6 years old and went there lots of times on holidays as a teenager. So I wanted to explore that. And as I did that, so I went to Ghana, did my field work for over a period of 10 months. And I think I went there really open. I just wanted to understand the implementation and its interaction with cultural values. I don't think at the time I had specific cultural values in mind that maybe could pose an obstacle to the convention. But when I started in my data collection, what really came out repeatedly in the data I collected from adults and from young children, older children, from experts, was the importance of responsibility, respect, and reciprocity in the parent-child relationship and in the socialization of children process in the context of Ghana, and how it was very clear as people talked about these things, how these clashed or potentially could clash with dominant discourses of children's rights as outlined in the convention. And it was really stark. It was very obvious. So, when I was analyzing my data, these were some of the themes that really emerged from the data that I'd collected, looking at the convention and how it clashed with certain cultural values, making it a bit difficult for its implementation to be realized within the cultural and social context of somewhere like Ghana. And so actually one of my first articles after I finished my PhD was entitled something like the 3 R's of something. I can't remember it. The 3 R's, and it was like respect, responsibility, and reciprocity. And then since then is this I've become really interested in reciprocity because every research project I do in Ghana, doesn't matter what topic I'm doing it on, as long as it's about the socialization process or parent-child relationships, or even like about just social relations in that context, reciprocity comes up over and over again. And it's actually got me thinking about how reciprocity shaped my life because I don't think I realized until then how reciprocity has shaped my own life in the context that I grew up in. And although I left Ghana at quite a young age, I've realized how reciprocal I am as just a human being and how it's like it just kind of features in my life. And I don't think I was aware of that as a part of my personality until this data started to, or this theme started to emerge consistently in different projects in the research that I do.
That's incredible. Super interesting. And I have read that 3Rs article. It's incredible.
So you know the title?
you know, it's something like that. Yeah, I can't think of
Three
it.
R's. Yeah, it starts off with three R's and then yeah, yeah. We
Yeah,
can check it out later.
we'll have to. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you've mentioned, that concept of reciprocity just, comes up time and time again in all of your work, which is
Yeah.
something that, I have found to be incredibly interesting and I hadn't considered prior to beginning this sort of research journey as well. So, obviously I have read your article, but for our listeners today, would you be able to define reciprocity in the context of child rights? Give us a bit of a summary there.
I don't know if it's reciprocity in the context of child rights. I can talk about just the understanding of reciprocity. And basically, reciprocity is based on a trust-trust relationship. It's about it's about understanding that within a relationship, each party has something to offer to the other. It doesn't have to be an equivalent. So just because I give you like £500, it doesn't mean you have to give me £500 back. But it means that we've entered into a relationship of exchange, which goes over time and it can encompass not just you and me, but our your children, my children, and more generations to come. And basically, what it means is that each party, I guess it's like a bargaining tool, but each party gives what they can in the context of that relationship. It's recognizing the mutuality and interdependence between individuals, and that nothing is given um, just because, and that each party needs to offer what they can within the context of that relationship. And so I think it's really important to make clear that it sounds very transactional and it can sound very crass, So sometimes some people are like, oh, just because you did something for someone doesn't mean that you should expect them to do something back for you. And I think it's really important to realize that while it can come across like that sometimes, it can come across in a very transactional way. I think it's really important to understand that that's not how it's meant to come across. It's just based on the fact that within a relationship, every party has something to give, and they will do so based on what they have capacity to give. And it doesn't have to be immediate. So if I do something, if I do something for you, it doesn't mean you have to do the same thing for me, and it doesn't mean you have to do it for me immediately. But it does mean that at some point when I come to you or my child comes to you, you will help them at that time. So the help that you might give might not necessarily be back to me. And it might take a completely different nature. It might be something that you might do for my child, my grandchild, and it might look completely different from whatever help I gave to you. So it's a relationship, an ongoing relationship between two or more parties where they keep helping each other. And this is in the context where there's a recognition of vulnerability and interdependence and mutuality, and people knowing that actually, in order for them to survive and to meet their own objectives, they need the help of others because life is hard and difficult and precarious, and that nobody can achieve their own objectives by themselves. I can give you a really good example from a project that I did And what one interviewer said to me, and he didn't use the term reciprocity, or maybe he did, but I think this captures it really well. So this interviewer was from the northeast of Ghana, near the Burkina Faso border. And he was talking about when he was growing up in the 1950s in Ghana. And he talked about how, you know, after the heavy rain period, all the families were focused on painting their house, making the outside of their house look fresh again. And what they would do is everybody in the community would go to each house and paint it. So you start off with the first house, everyone in the community would come and paint their house. Then when they finished, everybody, including those people who've just had their house painted, would move to the next house and paint their house. And they would do that for each house. And so in that way, everyone gets their house painted relatively quickly and with a few resources that they have as a community. And so it just captured it. And if you didn't participate in that painting, then nobody's going to help you come and paint your house. You'd be left alone to paint your own house because you haven't helped the community and other people in your community to paint the house as everyone else has done. And I think for me, that captured it really well in terms of what reciprocity is about.
That's an incredible example. And I think this sort of concept of reciprocity is just becoming increasingly important in this, isolated world that we have here. And, this idea of we don't owe each other anything and things like that. And I think this sense of mutuality is just so pivotal. Mainstream child rights discourse has often centered on protection and provision. How might a focus on reciprocity challenge or expand dominant narratives in the field?
I mean, one thing that I think reciprocity does do to the mainstream children's rights discourse is that it recognizes or it foregrounds the notion of children having something to give back. And that this notion of mutuality and interdependence, if we are increasingly talking about those terms, is not just something we see in relationships amongst adults, and that we can also see this and recognize this in within the context of adult-child relationship. And if we recognize that reciprocity is not about giving back exactly what has been given to you, then it really opens up the space to explore how children give back within the context of their relationships with adults. So in the context of Ghana, children emphasize this and they talk about the need to respect and the need to do their duty so that they get some things back. But actually in the context of in other contexts, let's think about maybe research or something. You have children who've talked about wanting to take part in a research study because they wanted to give back to this person that has really been helpful to them in a school context, like a teacher, or they wanted to help somebody to achieve their objectives because they really liked what that person has done for them. And this is not in the context of Ghana or Africa. This is like even children talking about, let's say, when teachers are doing research or something and why they wanted to participate in the context of the UK. So it's about when we start thinking about how reciprocity is about you give what you can at that moment when you can, and it doesn't have to be immediate. It starts to make us think about that children are competent and that children also want to give back within the context of relationships with adults that they trust, who they recognize as having helped them. And in response, they want to also do something back. And they're not trying to do exactly the same thing, but they want to do whatever it is that they can for this person who they see as important in their life. So I think it opens that space for us to recognize the competence of children, the mutuality that you can have between adults and children, and the interdependence that does exist. It also makes us recognize that adults are not completely independent. They're not this category of people who are completely self-reliant, and that actually they also need children, that they get something back from their relationship with children. It's not unilinear. both are giving something to each other within the context of relationship. It could be material, but it could also be emotional.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Yeah. So you've been talking a lot about, this importance of context, and you've written a lot about that as well. So how does reciprocity help us to better understand child rights from a more grounded, localized perspective?
Okay, so I mean, I think I've done most of my research about reciprocity has been on Ghana, and I've done some research in Nigeria. But I'm really keen to emphasize that it's really important for us to start looking at reciprocity more broadly, because while dominant human rights or children's rights discourses see rights as entitlements, as given a priori, I can't say that word, are given to us simply because we're human or simply because we're children. If you look at how social relations actually manifest themselves or how they actually operate on a day-to-day basis in large parts of the world, we see that rights are not seen as entitlements simply. They are seen for many people, not for everyone, but for many people, they are seen as being based or being something that is based on a reciprocal obligation or a reciprocal relationship of some kind. And this is something that is not just about adults, but it's also about children. And so we do need to understand that, yes, the mainstream legal interpretation of children's rights does, and human rights does see it in a particular way, but actually how people understand social relationships and how they understand their interactions with each other and their obligations to each other has to make us look beyond rights as entitlements and look at how notions of or the realities of interdependence and mutuality means that for many people in this world, rights cannot just be seen as simple entitlements, that they're seen as part of a reciprocal exchange that goes on between individuals, whether they're adults or whether they're children. And we need to have space to have a proper discussion about what that means um, for legal understandings of children's rights.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. And I feel like that kind of way of thinking about child rights is not as common. And it's, something
Yeah,
that we need to continue those discussions about. Absolutely. Um,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So how might incorporating reciprocity shift how adults, whether that's parents or policymakers or practitioners, relate to children and young people in everyday life?
I mean, I think within the context of Ghana, I mean, it does mean that both adults and children enter a relationship knowing that whether they recognize it or not, realizing that it's a two-way relationship, it's a two-way exchange that is happening. I mean, one of the things that is really important to understand about reciprocity in Ghana, like, the children I talk to, they talk about respect and being obedient and doing their duties. But actually, what really came through is that they do those things in order to ensure that their needs are met by the adults they live with or, teachers or whatever. But actually, what also came through, not in all communities, but some communities, was that actually when adults didn't do their bit as part of that exchange, children also didn't feel that they needed to do their bit anymore. And so adults could also be penalized for not playing the role expected of them in that reciprocal obligation, and they could face disapproval from other adults as well as um, 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 disapproval from children as well. So, in the context of Ghana, what it means is that they're all, both parties are able to ensure that when they enter a relationship, that they realize that they're going to help each other and that they're going to ensure that their needs are met. And that even though it's not spoken, there's also an understanding that if either party doesn't play their part, they can be penalized. In the context of Ghana, it's very clear what the penalties are for children for not playing their part. But children can also make clear to adults that if they don't play their part, there are also penalties for them. And it's it's implicit, it's not spoken, especially the penalties for adults, but it does come through when adults don't play their part. So I think I've gone off the question a little bit. You might have to remind me what it is so to make sure I try and answer it. But what is it again?
Yeah, I mean, very interesting response. It's about how incorporating reciprocity will shift or change how adults are relating to children. Um,
Yeah, so I think the point I wanted to make with that was that it does help to maybe balance things out a little bit in terms of the adult-child relationship. I'm not saying that in Ghana, adults and children are equal because really, really they're not. But when you do see that um, adults can also be penalized by children through children's disapproval and not doing what the adults want them to do because adults haven't played their part. I think there's a conversation there about how power might be shared between adults and children when we start thinking in terms of the reciprocal obligations between the two parties of different generations and what actually happens when adults in particular don't play the role expected of them in a reciprocal relationship. And I think that's something that we need to explore a bit more. So there's a lot of data about what could happen to children if they don't play their part. Yes, physical punishments and all of that stuff. In my research, I've seen a little bit about the disrespect that children can feel they can give to adults when they don't play the role expected of them in that reciprocal relationship. But I would like to explore that a bit more, not just in Ghana, but across like other West African countries where reciprocity is as important, just to understand what are actually the penalties that adults suffer when they don't play their role within the reciprocal relationship. And what that means to me is that when we talk about childhoods in Africa, for example, we talk about there's a real emphasis on reciprocity, on respect and obedience, etc., etc. But actually, it's not as simple as that. That these are things that children give to adults because of this reciprocal exchange, and they can also withhold from certain adults, again, because of the reciprocal exchange. So it's not that African children are passive because they talk about the importance of respect and obedience. It's something that they're doing strategically in order to meet their objectives in a context where reciprocity is important. And they can also withhold it. So I think there's something there, and I'm not articulating it very clearly, but I think there's something there to understand in terms of how children do use these concepts of respect and obedience strategically in this reciprocal relationship and how they withhold it from adults who don't play their part. And I think there's something there that I think I would like to explore maybe a bit more, the penalties that adults suffer from children when they don't play their part in a reciprocal relationship.
That's incredibly interesting, and I look forward to reading that when you do get that, researched and published and everything. I think that like unspoken element of power that children hold in that reciprocal relationship is incredibly interesting. So I'm excited for that. So finally, to conclude here, I would like to ask you, what advice would you give to researchers, organizations, or youth advocates who want to take reciprocity seriously in their child rights work?
Yeah. Are you hearing the noise outside?
No, you're
Okay, that's fine because I think there's a vehicle. So I think I mean, the first thing to say is that just think about it more. I would love to see reciprocity discussed and explored in the adult-child relationship in other contexts. A lot of the time, you see it in relation to Africa. And my argument is that it's not reciprocity is not just important in social relations in Africa. I believe it's also important in social relationships in Europe and North America, in certain, maybe not all communities, but I think in certain communities or certain relationships, adult-child relationships, I would love to see that explored a lot more. So for more junior researchers, I'd say do explore what children make of reciprocity, what adults are making of reciprocity within the adult-child relationship in whatever context they're doing their research, whether it's Canada or Brazil or India. I'd love to see more of that kind of research. And I think it's really important to understand from children themselves how they understand the reciprocal the reciprocal relationship, why they engage in reciprocal behaviors with adults, what motivates them, what they gain from it. And also the same, I suppose, with parents and caregivers. But I think it's really important for us to gather children's understandings of this notion of reciprocity and how it operates in their lives and actually how they navigate it or how they strategically use it in their relationship. I think those are the two things I think I would say I'd like to see.
Well, as a young researcher myself, that is very motivating to hear. So thank you for that. And thank you, Dr. Twum-Danso Imoh, for your thoughtful insights and your contributions to a more nuanced and relational approach to child rights. It's been an absolute privilege to speak with you today. I know I've definitely learned a lot. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us. Stay tuned for more engaging conversations coming soon on all things child rights. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And it's been really illuminating. And actually, it's got me thinking about some new areas that I might want to explore. So, but thank you very much.
Amazing.